In a world where talent is evenly distributed, but venture capital is concentrated in coastal silos, smart startup money is heading for the Midcontinent. Welcome to the Midcon Markup, a podcast that uncovers the inspiring stories of our visionary tech entrepreneurs and the investors who believe in them. I'm your host, Cody Merrill with Cortado Ventures. Listen, learn, and make your Midcon Markup.
Welcome to another episode of the Midcon Markup. Today, we're fortunate to be joined by Matt Waraich.
Thanks for having me on, Cody.
Matt, tell us a little bit about your background, what has led you to Cortado, what was your upbringing like, early professional experiences, and then why are you doing this now?
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I feel like a lot of people in VC, they always have different windy roads of how they got to where they are. But, growing up, pretty typical. So, born in Vancouver, British Columbia, actually, so just north of the border. Went to school in Vancouver. Post-secondary, I attended the University of British Columbia. And, back then, the only real question that you had, especially with immigrant parents, was, doctor, lawyer, engineer, take your pick. What do you want to be? So entrepreneurship really was not in the equation. Law school was my pick of the three. So throughout my undergrad, I kind of had that in sight, and then kind of winding down, a little bit closer to graduation, I started toying around with software development. So in my last year, I decided to take a complete 180 and transition into software engineering. From there, I was in talks with one of my close friends, and he thought, hey, I know business, and the software side, we should get together and start a company. So that ended up turning into a software development business. We were building websites at first, and then it turned into an entire marketing component as well, where we introduced SEO options for the websites as well. And then that really sparked the entrepreneurship flame in me, I would say. It was just one of those things where we kind of fell into it. Pretty much, I would say with 99% of other people, or maybe that might be a bit much, but a lot of other people, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? Number one is you don't see yourself working for anybody else. You think that you would rather go out there and not be stuck in a box, and you'd want to build things yourself, take your own risks, have control of your life in a sense. And that's not to say that people who are more comfortable just kind of having their day job, there's nothing wrong with that either. That's kind of where I started out, and then kind of got me moving forward with my next startup. I met my co-founder at the time, online actually, and we'd gotten together for our first startup, which we were looking to kickstart and launch fully, but then COVID hit us like a bus, so that was dead in the water. At the time, I was kind of working on a side project that eventually spun out into our second startup, which got a lot more traction. We had a lot more success with that. Due to some unfortunate circumstances, that kind of came to a halt for a little while at least. And in that period of time, I was really just looking online and looking at other VCs who might be willing to fund us. And then I came across Cortado Ventures, and just learning a little bit more about the firm, I realized that there's no way they're going to take a chance on some guy up in Vancouver, especially with the focus of investing in the Midcon region. We're far from that. The post said, hey, we're looking to grow our investment team. Connected with Susan, and then ended up actually meeting a few of you folks down here. I thought you guys were awesome, and the rest is history.
So what's the weather differential this time of year between Oklahoma and Vancouver?
You know what? You guys are, I guess now me, myself, we're living in an oven down here. Vancouver is right at that, excuse me, we're right at that sweet spot where, you can go out in the day in a t-shirt and you might need a hoodie at night, but over here it's, you're cooking on well done till about 10 p.m. And even then you're sweating walking to your car. So it's pretty substantial.
About those Vancouver winters, what are those like?
You know what? Prior to contrary belief, Vancouver probably has the most mild winters in Canada. I would say our weather is more more like Seattle and maybe somewhat close to LA. Whereas I honestly think that the winters down here are worse. The wind chill down here, I feel like it gets you right to your bones. And in Vancouver, like we maybe get snow once, maybe twice a year, but it's pretty bearable. You're good with maybe a hoodie and light jacket.
Okay, but how often does it rain?
Oh my God. Yeah, don't get me. The rain is horrendous. The rain is absolutely horrendous. And I only say that now because, living down here in for most months of the year, such great weather. And then going back to visit, or for whatever reason I go back, and dealing with the rain over there. And you would think that people who live in Vancouver would know how to drive in the rain, but a lot of the time it doesn't feel that way. So, love the city, love the people, but the weather isn't the greatest in terms of rain.
So lots of people who have software development backgrounds and they're from Canada end up coming to the United States for either VC or to work for startups, but they don't usually go from Vancouver to Oklahoma.
Yeah. I mean, I think that goes to I don't want to say the credit of, but a lot of the decision came from my past experiences with certain VCs on the West Coast and the East Coast. So I knew that obviously, coastal VCs are totally different. And it's not to say that, these certain VCs pushed me away, but I had an idea of a common trend with the ones that I talked to at least. There's a lot of, venture capital firms on both coasts. And, even now I've met a lot of great ones. So I don't want to make a generalization here. But, with that experience in the back of my head from my previous startup, and then being able to connect with you guys, and then obviously with Susan, our first few conversations, and then coming down with meeting with people like yourself and a few other people, I kind of realized like, hey, you know what? These guys aren't so bad. And it really felt like a startup that I was joining. It didn't feel like I was walking into corporate, and even the whole ecosystem itself. And I think about this a lot actually, is that I'm going from startup to startup. The people obviously were the biggest reason, but then looking at it, I felt like I would be able to leave my own mark on not only Cortado, but the ecosystem itself and the people that I meet every single day. And I think that's really, shown true. Whereas, we get to interact with a lot of the same people a lot of the time.
Well, can you share more about the investment thesis for Cortado and what your role is in that pipeline process?
Yeah, of course. Obviously Cortado focuses on the Mid-Continent region, so investing in founders from Oklahoma or the states touching, but there are cases where founders have gone to OU or OSU and they've moved out to the coast, but then they've kind of reached back out and figured that they might want to bring their company home. But in terms of the diligence process, I would say that my work is split between meeting founders, conducting the diligence process, which I'll get a little bit more into, between that as well as portfolio support. So in terms of the diligence process, it could be anything all the way from the top of the funnel, where it's meeting with founders who might have submitted an application, and then from there, putting together a write-up of the company. So answering specific questions that we do like to look at, such as their business model, who on their team is seasoned and who's experienced, looking at their financials, looking into their data room, conducting customer calls, which is huge for us, and getting an overall feel of the market that they're trying to pursue. So it's nice that, we get to touch a little bit of everything. But in terms of the portfolio support side, that looks like a lot of different things every single day. It could be, founders in our portfolio already reaching out to us and saying, hey, we need this introduction, or, hey, we're struggling with this aspect of fundraising. Do you know anybody that's in this space? Or do you know a VC who might be interested in distributing capital at this time right now? So really just trying to help them be successful, because I think, or not even I think, I know rather, that once you make the founders in your portfolio successful, ultimately it's going to make you successful. It's going to make everybody happier, right?
Well, why don't you talk about Cortado's thesis?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Cortado's thesis. So like I mentioned, investing in founders in the Midcon, strictly B2B in the fields of aerospace, energy, life sciences, and the future of work. Investing in companies at the earliest stages of pre-seed all the way up to Series A, and again, with those three stages, those are the most critical times, I personally believe, that companies are shaped to either, make it or break it. Like when you're conducting diligence on a pre-seed company versus one that's later on, maybe between like a seed round and a Series A, looks totally different. At the pre-seed stage, I mean, a lot of or maybe I should work backwards rather. So when you're looking at companies in the seed stage or even up to the Series A, you have metrics to go off of. You have contracts, you have potential customers, you have an entire market that they're already trying to attack and seeing what's going to help them scale from now. So it's a lot more statistical. And with that being said, it is a little bit easier to check the boxes. Not that I'm saying that checking boxes is good, because there's so much more that goes into the process. But at the pre-seed stage, I absolutely love, because that, I think, shows the true signs of what a good VC is. And again, I'm nowhere near the epitome of what a master VC is. I've been in the game for about a year and a half. But founder tenacity is huge. I think the market that they're capturing, and obviously having a realistic idea of what they're doing with their company. So and these aren't exact examples, but I'm just saying, for instance, if a founder walked through the door and said, "Hey, I have the next Facebook, and we're going to generate $1 billion in the next 5 years," you love the enthusiasm, but realistically, that might not be the case, versus a founder who comes in the door and says, "I worked at this company previously. I started this company after that. I had," who knows, maybe they had a successful exit, which is a huge key indicator of these guys know what they're doing. They have all the right pieces in place, and they say, "Okay, we're going to attack this niche of the market, and we are going to work towards product market fit," obviously, which is massive. It's something that companies strive to attain, especially when they start getting into that Series A section, but they use that as their North Star, which I think is extremely important. So, tenacity, level-headedness, and just being realistic with yourself and your investors, I think is a surefire way for them to be successful as well.
How do you advise pre-seed founders trying to raise their first round how do you recommend that they address this paradox of market size, where if it's not this massive market, then no VC will give them any time of day, but you also don't want to boil the ocean? So how do they tell this story that they're going to dominate this one little niche and then they're going to migrate into a much larger market opportunity? How do they tell that succinctly, and how does that resonate with a VC?
Yeah, honestly, that's a great question. I think that this particular subject is so great in terms of relating to software development too, because in software development, you look at an app on your phone and you say, "Okay, I'm going to build this app," but there's so many components that go into it. It's not like you go from 0 to 10, right? You go from 0 to 1, for lack of a better reference.
Yeah.
I'm sure every entrepreneur out there has read that book, but so pretty much starting with something small. But yeah, more to your question, how do they kind of attain that? When you look at the market sizing, I feel like especially us at Cortado, we like to see that around that $1 billion market size.
From a bottom up.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So a $1 billion market size, we think is large enough for people to penetrate, but also if you're competing with other players in the market, then I think there's enough wiggle room there. But again, it does vary industry to industry. And I feel like everything is so subjective when you go from industry to industry. So, software technology is where, I love to live. So, you try to get into the market of software platforms. They're a dime a dozen these days. And obviously that industry is definitely worth a lot more than $1 billion. But, you shift one over and you go to something like energy. For example, an oil and gas company might be trying to get into a $500 million market or $700 million market, and you realize there's only two players in it. So, and you can really see through historically, how long do they stay with whatever provider that they have? They tend not to change too much in terms of their business practices. How long is that going to keep customers satisfied for? How likely is it that they're going to be willing to jump? How long can you sign them for?
Okay, but whenever founders are applying for money from Cortado, is it a bigger turnoff to see an unrealistically large market, or to see them present too narrow of a market?
Yeah,
because we know that the truth is nuanced.
Yeah.
But how do we recommend founders understand what's going on in a VC's head and deal with this?
So, when founders generally, or at least typically walk in the door at the earlier stage, especially the pre-seed, they're coming in with a crazy market size. They might say something like, "Oh, we are a software company," and look at the value of the enterprise software. But enterprise software industry could be $100 billion, but this company could be doing cybersecurity. What does your niche of the market, which could be anywhere from 1 to 2 billion, have to do with the rest of the 98, 99 billion? So to your question, I think the smaller size does make a little bit more sense, because it also gives that first impression of these guys are underselling themselves, and it allows VCs to think, these guys aren't thinking about this right now, these guys aren't thinking about that. But then when that comes up in conversation, then they'll be like, we just didn't want to kind of give the impression that we're trying to capture too much right off the bat. So definitely going with the lesser value is something that I like to see. But of course, that's always through a conversation.
So VCs respect early stage founders walking in, being realistic and being focused on solving a very specific problem for a very specific user. And then we are capable in VC of extrapolating to see the bigger picture. Exactly.
And again, I say everything is so subjective, because when they come in with this lesser valuation, you obviously know in your head that they have a larger market. And when you have that conversation with them, the great founder might say, like I just said, we didn't want to come off too strong. But then sometimes with founders walk in with some, ginormous market size, they'll say, oh, but we can do this, but we can do that. And, I feel like any good VC is going to have that conversation and be able to realize that sooner than later.
So what are some founder behaviors to emulate, and then some founder behaviors to avoid?
Yeah.
In the context of raising money from a venture capital firm?
Yeah, I think number one, and I would say it goes from anywhere from pre-seed all the way to Series E, is be honest. Be honest with your investors, but also be honest with yourself. And that could be anything from, hey, we have commitments from, so-and-so clients. We have commitments from so-and-so investor. If you lose that trust in the beginning, then, all you really have in this game is your word, right? Especially when you're starting out. If you're not credible in the beginning and not trustworthy, VC is a small industry. People are going to find out. So being honest, I think being tenacious is definitely huge as well.
So hang on, I've got to follow up on the honesty point.
Okay.
Because by nature, founders are trying to sell this future that doesn't exist today.
Yeah.
And so there's this, you have complete conviction that what you're doing is right. And it becomes very easy to oversell and overrepresent. But at the same point in time, if you're not excited about it and you're not an optimist, then nobody will follow you anywhere. So it seems like what you're saying is that there's an art to using very carefully crafted language so that everything is technically true. You're not overselling. You're not saying something is committed and locked in whenever it isn't. It's just a deal in the pipeline that is being considered, that there's ways to craft the language to still promote a positive outlook without ever being dishonest.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a perfect way to say it. And I think I will kind of switch sides right now, and I will revert to my founder
Yeah.
feelings. So, if you're not excited about it and you're not cheering for yourself, who's going to? So I 100% respect that. I think you going out there and selling that dream obviously to some extent is awesome. Selling it is great, but miscommunicating what you're planning to deliver is a big red flag.
So be liberal about the vision that you're selling.
Exactly.
But be conservative about what you're saying has happened to date.
Yeah, exactly. And I get it. Like, I've been a founder before, and I've been in that seat where you need, like, what is the founder's number one ask? You need money, and you need to be that salesman or saleswoman to get that money in the door.
The old definition of daily active user.
Exactly. So like active user, or even just like active downloads, things like that. You could have someone come in and say, oh yeah, we had 1 million downloads, but it could be like 1 million impressions on socials or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? So interactions, things like that. So things tend to get caught in the weeds. And, back to the VC side too, I think that it's always a good practice to ask the questions, or ask the dumb questions rather, and then not operate off of assumptions with founders, because you don't want to get caught in that situation where you said, oh, but I said this, but then you going back and saying, oh, I thought that. But anyways, back to your point. Definitely be conservative and liberal at the same time.
Okay, so back to attributes of a founder that you like. We have honesty, and then I cut you off on tenacity.
Yeah, tenacity. I mean, it's a tough game. It's really rough. And if you look at, statistics of deals that, VCs look at, and then eventually get a yes, and honestly at the end get approved, you're looking at somewhere like less than 2%. So no is going to be a big part of the game. And, the utmost respect goes out to founders now who have to deal with no's every single day, especially in a VC market that is, yes, it's frozen, or, it's somewhat thawing, but, it's still frozen for the most part. It is tough to get money out here. And, the tenacity that founders are showing, not only in our portfolio alone, but, just founders we meet every day. Some of them aren't just, 19, 20, 21-year-old college kids. Some of them, some people have families. Some of them didn't come from target schools. Some of them didn't waive Harvard and Oxford. And that's not to take anything away from those founders. But, those founders who didn't come from Ivy League, they're putting their blood, sweat, and tears into this. And that really resonates with me, because, you don't know when that paycheck is going to be coming. You don't know what's going to happen 2 years down the line, 5 years down the line. Looking back at it, you can say, yes, I learned so much more than I would have working a cushy, job in somewhere else. But, the fact that you wake up at the risk of sounding corny here too, but the fact that you wake up every single day not knowing what, your next week is going to look like and whether the company's going to make it or not, I think that just shows so much, not only stress management, but, again, like tenacity to keep saying it doing it every single day.
But in the diligence process, how does a founder demonstrate that they are more tenacious than other founders who are also in that diligence process? And there's a balance between being tenacious and also being couth.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know what, and this actually leads into my next point too, so maybe I can kind of combine them. So saying, like, getting a no doesn't mean never. So, when I say that is, again, like I said, we say no a lot. Unfortunately, VCs have to say no a lot. Founders hear no a lot. But the founders that can take the no and have the I don't want to say mental maturity, but they have the mindset to think, okay, they're saying no right now because of where I'm at. I can come back and I can maintain that good relationship. I can be personable with them, which is going to be one of my points as well. Being personable is huge. They can maintain that rapport going forward, and over the next X amount of months, sometimes even years. I think that takes a lot for them to do. So in the diligence process, I think when they hear no, but hey, can I be adding you to our investor list? Can I send you updates when something big happens? Can we grab coffee next quarter? Things like that. I think that's huge.
Yeah, I think that the best founders are always focused on the path to yes. And they deeply prioritize the personal relationship. And so they don't want to be so urgent that they seem desperate, but very much so on the ball, communicative, and updates.
Yeah. And like, with that being said, the best founders are always the ones who treat the relationship like a garden. They're continuously watering it. They are, checking in, sending updates. They're really trying to take care of what the effort that they've already put in, and they have respect for the other person. So I think that's huge. And again, I've been on the other side of the table where VCs have told me no, and my first thought is, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm going to show him, and then never talk to them again. That is such a terrible mentality, and I'm guilty of having done that. And, I've seen founders now do it, but again, all the power to you. But if you do leave on those unsavory terms, you always got to remember it's a smaller network out there than you think.
Okay, whenever you do send a rejection email to a founder, and then the founder replies to that rejection email, do you like it whenever the founder is like, okay, I hear what you said, but for X, Y, and Z reasons, I think this is why this is still a good investment? Or do you wish that they would just say, okay, thank you, I'll keep you apprised? Or what's the best way to handle it?
Yeah, I think that is, like you said, that's the best way to do it. But, just starting with that rejection email process, I just want to go out there and say, VCs who ghost founders is a big no-no. And at the end of the day, and I want to say, if anybody's listening, there are some emails that do fall through the cracks. So I'm sure every VC doesn't do it intentionally. But, the ones that do it intentionally, to the founders, I think you dodged a bullet. You don't want to be kind of associated with those types of people. When we do get a response to that email, a lot of the time it's positive. They say, thank you, let me keep you updated. It shows a great sign of maturity that they're doing that. It shows that they care about your opinion, and they know that relationship, there's a possibility for it to be fruitful later on down the road. You do have those, certain founders who knows, they could have been having a bad day, and they respond to it and saying, oh, this doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense. And, a lot of the time, we'll go one step further and explain a little bit further, but then if they just come back with the same thing, it's really hard to have that conversation, especially over email. And then if you happen to see them in person, you can talk a little bit about it more, but ultimately, it's always good to respond to them, and then getting a response back is pretty good too.
Yeah. Something else that I want founders to understand is that just the mechanics of a diligence process, the way that CRMs work for, I would imagine, every VC. I think most everybody uses Affinity. But whenever we're in a pipeline meeting and we're talking about updates, like everything that you put in writing to that VC is going to be accessible. And so that's the starting point. And so if you make claims in writing, then you will forever be held accountable to those claims to that organization. Yeah. Are there other insights from just the process that you can share with founders to help them understand ultimately how to deliver you the best input?
Just having all your materials ready. I think that is number one, and always be thinking about, okay, if that customer call is going to come into play, which a lot of the time it does. And more so on our side too, initial meeting, a lot, like 99% of the time, or I would say almost 100% of the time, the founders have their sales deck, they have their investment deck ready to go. And sometimes they just might need to prep their data room. So containing financials, contracts, IP, anything like that. Within the next few days of talking to them. But, some founders don't. That does tend to delay the process a little bit. Our process looks anywhere from about, I would say, 4 to 8 weeks. And I want to talk a little bit to that as well, if that's okay. We do like to work quickly and efficiently. And we obviously don't like to rush the process, but I'm sure that there's some founders out there thinking, wow, these VCs are taking so long to get back to me. And, that waiting process definitely is annoying, especially after having some great conversations. But it's not just the sole VC who might be touching that deal as well. So, here at Cortado, we do rely on, or not solely rely, but we do rely substantially on our expert network. So if I had a biotech deal come into me and I reached out to one of our biotech advisors, just being able to get their insight and, eventually their written feedback on the deal and putting that in file and then being able to discuss it with the team, that sometimes takes a lot more time than anticipated, because, you got to factor in, what if this advisor or, one of our many advisors are on vacation? What if they are out of office for, their own work purposes? What if they aren't able to get back to it because they're extremely busy? That's generally things that do tend to prolong the process. But overall, the amount of time that it takes is for a good reason. It's not that your deck or your materials are sitting at the bottom of the pile and we just don't care about it.
So be honest in all of your communications, especially your written communication. Be tenacious and convey that tenacity through consistent, prompt, polite follow-up, and then have your data room in order, and then know who your primary customer call targets are going to be, and just have everything lined up so that all the VC has to do is make a decision.
Yeah. I mean, that would probably check most of the boxes there.
Cool. Let's see. What do you know now as a VC about the fundraising process that you wish you knew as a founder?
I think that there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff with VCs that founders don't know about. For example, if there's, dry powder for VCs to use to invest in certain companies, or maybe they're in the process of raising their next fund, or they're just rounding out all of their investments, kind of getting that information or finding that investment information online is gonna save everybody a lot of time. I think one of the most important things to avoid disappointment on the founder's end is doing the research on the VCs that you would like to receive an investment from. Find out, what their thesis is. I think that's so important. If you go to, if you come to Cortado, we do have quite a few founders who reach out that are consumer-based products. It's not something we do. We're strictly business to business. They write up a great email, put together a great deck. They might be specific towards us to some extent, but eventually it just ends up wasting their time. Secondly, you're vetting the VCs just as much as the VCs are vetting you. So just the other day, we had a founder respond to us saying, okay, what do you like to, if we were to have this, initial founder conversation, what would you be looking to get out of it? Where do you see yourselves adding value? If you were offered a board seat, what do you think that you would be able to bring to the table? Are you more hands-on? Are you more kind of sit in the back and wait for a return type of thing? Some of the questions obviously are a little bit far-fetched, but it's good. It's good to have an idea of what they're thinking.
Before an intro call, they gave you a questionnaire?
Exactly. Yeah. Which,
did you like that, or would you prefer that come after the intro call?
I mean, Tim, I honestly would like to, instead of rather filling out this questionnaire, which I thought was different, and I respect people being unique. I don't know if I was the biggest fan of it, and I'm more used to those questions in person, or at least on Zoom. So it was cool to see. It was something different.
I mean, maybe it's like restaurants who manufacture a line outside the restaurant, and then you get in and it's like empty.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh wait, no, that is their marketing strategy.
Exactly that. So yeah, number one, knowing your VC. Number two is, this is so critical at the pre-seed level too, is, when you're going into these conversations, make sure you have a leg to stand on. So when I say that, I mean, like, when you're coming in with a crazy valuation and you're asking for, X amount of dollars, let's say, for example, like $1 million, but all you really have is an idea, and maybe, your MVP is in process. How are you going to sit at the table and ask for these things when you don't really have anything to prove for it?
So there's two, like, competing pieces of advice that people get. One is be reasonable, and then the other is you don't get what you don't ask for. So you may as well start the negotiation high, and then you can whittle it down to something manageable.
Exactly.
What's the best way for a founder to look out for their interests and just the human nature that there is some give and take with negotiation, while also immediately conveying on the front end that they are a reasonable person, that they do understand that where a VC's at, where we're trying to make economic decisions for our limited partners' funds?
No, great question. I think that it's super important to guard your startup like a baby, because that's what it is. It's your baby. And you're going to do everything to protect that baby, or at least as much of that baby as possible, right? So, in these conversations, when you have, you obviously, number one, you need to know your platform, your product, whatever it is, like the back of your hand. You need to showcase that, I know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not going to be, taken for a ride in any single way. And that goes for the same as VC. And like you said, we're working in the best interest of our LPs. We're looking to provide the best possible return. So, the conversation is, I look at it as like a dance. It's a very delicate art of
the valuation conversation.
The valuation conversation, but even when you get to the term sheet, and I might be jumping it.
Terms in general.
Yeah, terms in general. I might be jumping the gun a little bit. But from the founder perspective, you have to, like I said, know what you're bringing to the table, know what you have, and have something to back up those claims. And again, be very, very weary of what the asks are from these VCs, because I've seen it online, and it's not anybody I know personally, but some terms tend to be somewhat predatory, and I guess that's just the name of the game for larger scale companies. And again, they're working in the best interest of their economic welfare. So totally understandable, right? It's business. From the VC perspective, I think it's generally understood. We do have points to kind of jump off of. General multiples for like revenue multiples. So for example, like the SaaS multiples might be like 7 or 6 or 5 in that ballpark.
Okay, but for like a pre-seed deal that's pre-revenue, very speculative, it's easy for founders to get a big head and have a very unrealistic expectation of that value.
Mm-hmm. So in that sense, I think it's just all the way up to the founder. You need to have a serious discussion with yourself in the mirror and think, okay, what do I think this company is worth right now? Where do I see it going? Where can I take it to get to the valuation that I might want it to be? And what can I use to back it up? So I think I've said this like 5 times already, but have something to back up your claims, because if you don't have anything to really, vouch for what you're saying, especially in terms of metrics, who are you to say, like, it's your word against theirs?
Right.
And you can really just find industry statistics, disagreeing with you. And at that point, you're kind of backed into a corner of, okay, well, they're taking the time to have this discussion with me, where we've made it this far along, and now we're at the term stage, or, in this latter half of the discussions. Am I going to want to give it up here, or am I going to give it to them, or am I going to come back with something more reasonable?
Do you think that first-time founders overemphasize the importance of valuation and terms, and therefore underemphasize the quality of the relationship that they have with the investor and the investor's ability to add value to them?
Yeah, 100%. I think that pre-seed companies, depending on the sector, have a general valuation.
There's some band.
Exactly.
You might be lower in the band, you might be higher in the band. But it's not worth obsessing over.
Exactly. And anything that's gonna add value to your valuation. So, like I mentioned before, if you're coming from like a target school, you have a previous exit, you have some phenomenal network, or you have some great industry contacts. That is going to raise your valuation. That is why you can see, participating in an accelerator. So, for example, like the Y Combinator accelerator, companies that come out of there do have a significantly higher valuation, and it's because they have that badge. going forward. So there are certain things that exist outside of just the metrics that can raise that valuation. But, you know, back to your question of what do founders value more, I think that it's important for founders to realize, and this is something that I was guilty of, not understanding that giving up a slightly larger piece of your pie in order to have $1 million pie versus having 99% of a pie that's worth $10 is definitely a trade-off you want to make. You want to have those expertise on the table. You want to have those people in the room who are now, you know, invested in your company and they have some skin in the game versus you sitting there with all your riches but nothing to do with it.
And it's a marriage of sorts, right?
Oh yeah.
And so it's like, you know, does it matter if you spend a few $1,000 more on a wedding? Like if you're married to the right person,
exactly.
Or on the other side, if you marry the wrong person, like what really matters at the end of the day is that on this 7 to 10 year journey that you guys are on together to add value and create an exit, you're going to have lots of meetings, lots of interactions with these investors. You better respect them and you better believe that they have the wherewithal to add value.
Yeah. And I feel like I don't want to say it's significantly different for, you know, first time founders and, you know, second time founders. But with the first time founders, you don't know what you're getting into. You don't know what decisions to make when if you're not a venture backed company or have never been, because they obviously have different insights. You're not just getting dollars in the bank. You're getting access to their expertise. You're getting access to their connections. You're getting access to their whole network of people who might be able to propel you to that next level. When you're a second time founder, third time founder, venture backed, you have a better idea of how to navigate the field. You know how to play the game. You know the ins and outs. You know, okay, this VC is going to provide value here, but maybe they might overlap somewhere else, so I don't need this other VC. And if you're fortunate enough, even when you get into later funding rounds, you can pick and choose the VCs. You know, that's honestly the best case scenario, right? You have people waiting in the restaurant line to get in and try the main course, which is your company. So I think it's very subjective and it varies so much.
Now I'm tempted to start a startup with my first action being an investor an investor waiting list.
Exactly. Hey, something's cooking and it's going to be really good. You just got to wait outside my restaurant.
Sign up right here.
Exactly.
So another marriage, not just the founder investor marriage, but also the co-founder marriage. That's a real burden. That's a real responsibility that first-time founders don't always fully appreciate. Yeah. So what do you recommend in choosing a co-founder, and what are some best practices for maintaining the quality of that marriage?
I think in terms of quality, so, you know, number one, obviously integrity is that's worth more than gold. I think that is so important. And then also, you know, what skill set are they bringing to the table? And it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, are they a good, you know, software engineer? Are they a good marketer? Obviously important things, but, you know, maybe they bring a certain amount of charisma to the table. Maybe they bring a network to the table. Maybe they bring, you know, obviously if they have ins with investors already, that's phenomenal. But even taking that one step further, when you actually find that right person is, you know, again, like you said, treating it like a marriage, being over communicative, you know, working through problems together and not letting things boil up. And I think that is one of the lessons that I've learned is that, you know, when you tend to ignore smaller things in the beginning and, you know, like I've been married for 2 years and this is a general practice that we have too. When something bothers you at first, bring it up then and there. Don't just try to ignore it. Obviously, within reason, you don't need to nitpick everything, but with your co-founder, you nip these in the bud earlier so it doesn't boil up to be a huge issue down the road. And I think that, again, like, you know, it reflects in all walks of life, but it's so important to find the right co-founder, the right partner in your business who's gonna really be that person who's gonna either help you take it from 0 to 1,000, or if you don't take the right steps, it's going to crash and burn.
All right. That's great, Matt. Thank you so much for your time today and your insight. I think that the founders and our audience will have a much better understanding of what happens behind the scenes at a venture capital firm and how to best impress Cortado.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
All right. Thanks, brother.
Sweet.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Midcon Markup. Please hit like and subscribe for more episodes.